Well, thank you very much. It's always a delight to be back here. Scott said to me this morning earlier, he said, "Where did you give your very first sermon in a church?" I said, "It was right here." It was right here. When we were in college, Dr. Cook said, "I want some of you to preach this," well, whenever it was, on a coming Sunday. And I was honored, delighted, surprised when my name was given to do one of those. So it was right here. And it's a delight to be back with you. Yes, I was given my topic, marriage. And even more specifically than that, he said, talk about loving the stranger. The stranger. Some of you are smiling. You get it. That person who won your heart and then you gladly married and anticipated a life together of delight and deferential sacrifice, much like your engagement time. That very same person has turned out to hold significantly different viewpoints than you on one or two or 500 different topics. I exaggerate, but only by a little. The truth is, God made us very different. It wasn't an accident. He didn't go, oops. He did it intentionally. Male and female, first of all, strikes us as, one of the differences. Researchers will tell us very quickly that our brains function differently. Shocking, right? Some of you have said, Doug, that's perhaps the most obvious statement you can make. Believers have received very different spiritual gifts designed to better take care of the physical and emotional and spiritual needs of the church. And when you have different spiritual gifts, you're going to view things differently by design, by intention. We have the gift of helps and the gift of administration or teaching or admonition. Those two respond very differently. Also, God gave us our unique families of origin, where nearly all of our thinking and social values are shaped, are they not? On top of all that He gave us, He gave us our personalities, which significantly impact all of our relationships. And more on that in just a minute. Over 17 years ago, we were in Melbourne, Australia, for a scorching few days in February. I mean, it was really hot. But we were not there primarily to experience the heat down under. We were there to celebrate the wedding of Scott and Fiona. One of the speakers on that delightful occasion gave a message with these as his two main points. Firstly, he challenged the new couple to love with wild abandon. Is it up there? Thank you. To love with wild abandon. Can you say that in church? Can you really say that? Are you supposed to talk about that? It doesn't just mean one side of a love relationship. It means all of it. It meant all of it. I don't think we really need to unpack that any further at this point. But that was his first point. Love with wild abandon. Throw yourself completely into it. Secondly, he implored this young couple to forgive recklessly. Now that's not a phrase you hear all the time, is it? Those words put together. When we think of something done recklessly, we think it's negative. It wasn't done well. That shouldn't have happened. Not true. Because really, when you do something recklessly, you do it quickly. You don't brood about it. You don't plan your counterattack. You already know, as a follower of Jesus Christ, it is ultimately what you're going to have to do. So do it quickly. Forgive recklessly. Don't even think about it. When there's an offense, when something's said that shouldn't have been said, when something's done that shouldn't have been done, just say, in your mind, I forgive you. And if you say it out loud, fine too. But sometimes if you say it out loud, it just makes them mad. Forgive recklessly. It's not meant as a negative comment. And you know what? We know it's hard to do that right away. But it's made all the much more easier if you decide ahead of time that's how you're going to respond. If you wait until the surprise of the offense, if you wait until the disappointment of what was said or done, you're going to struggle to go to forgiveness. But if you decide ahead of time, this is going to be my reaction. You make it a habit, you make it a pattern in your life and in your thinking. I am going to forgive what you just said. That hurt, but I'm going to forgive it. And why? Why would we want to do that? We're going to take a look more at that in just a second as well. This wedding message on that day could have easily come right out of Colossians 3:12-14. Let's take a look at that incredible and wonderful passage. Colossians 3:12-14. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. This is one of those biblical passages that simply cannot be brought to our attention enough. Because really applying these truths and obeying these commands would transform every relationship in your life. Your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your children, with your siblings, with your neighbors, with your colleagues, and especially with your spouse. Please stare up at this text while I attempt to give you an outline summarization. Are you looking at it? This incredible passage tells you how to think about yourself. Firstly, you are chosen by God. You are dearly loved, and you are to be holy. Whoa! You know, this is how we should think about ourselves. I'm this person. I think there's several songs in our modern worship, plethora of great choruses that say, you know, I am who I am, and you are who you are. Well, this is one of those passages that backs up the text in that song. God is saying to us, you are chosen, you are to be holy, and you are dearly loved. What a starting point. Do you think of yourself that way? Secondly, it tells us how to prepare for every interaction. Get dressed. Get dressed. I mean, you did that before you came to church today. You did it automatically. You didn't think of not doing that. So this is a passage that's telling us how to think about ourselves and then saying, get dressed and here's what you put on. 5 characteristics from Jesus Christ. Thirdly, how to respond to even irritating people. Bear with them. Bear with them. And who is our example for dealing with another offense? It's Jesus. He says to forgive as Jesus forgave you. Well, that puts it on a different level, doesn't it? If he had said, you should forgive because, well, you should. You just should. It's a good thing to do. No, he said, do it because your example is Jesus. How did he forgive? How did he forgive you? Pass that on. Jesus forgave recklessly. So, most of our Bibles have paragraph headings that basically function as spoiler alerts. Well, this is the paragraph heading for Colossians 3:12 to 13. It should say this. This should be the solution to all relationship problems. Even though when you know the right things to do and you do them, relationships don't always function well. One of the huge reasons that this is true in a marriage is that men and women tend to think and respond differently. I've already mentioned that, and you've already said, Doug, that's an understatement. It is. We tend to think differently. Men and women feel, think, and respond differently because God made them that way. Researchers have found that the brains of men and women are surprised to hear that men even have one. Researchers have found that the brains of men and women fire and react differently to the exact same stimuli or experience. Very differently. Their brains fire in a different part than men do when they look at the exact same picture. Now, this is true across cultures and across generations. Men and women function this way. Now, there are, of course, a few outliers who tend to think and react more like the opposite gender. But they are very small in number, even though I probably have been told I'm one of them. And these folks don't actually improve the situation because they tend to make things more complicated because they're not reacting like you expect them to. Okay. Didn't want to lick my fingers in public. Typically, women tend to want to share feelings and concerns. Men tend to want to fix those concerns and ignore those feelings. Let's take a quick look at a video clip that highlights these very reactions. You might be able to relate to this.
It's just, there's all this pressure, And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. All of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on, if you would just...
Don't...
It's not about the nail. He's convinced it is about the nail. But she was not. She was not. By the way, that's Jason Headley wrote and directed and acted in that skit, and the woman was Monica Barbaro, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. She played Natasha Trace in the movie Top Gun Maverick. She was Phoenix, and she was the only female jet pilot that was in the movie. So she's gone on to a little bit bigger and better things than skits, but she did a great job with this one too. Let's take a look at a real life example. Take this stunning young couple right here. They're there somewhere. Recently they were engaged and more than ready to get this show on the road, although they are from the same Midwestern state. Their God-given personalities were, well, significantly impacted and shaped by their respective upbringings, by their birth order, by their families of origin, which were distinctly different. Leanne was born in a town of 500 inhabitants. Then she lived for 10 years at the end of the road. Literally, the road stopped, and their house was there in the middle of a pasture with no other house in sight. She moved then to the hamlet of Myrna, which is a population of 390 people, and she lived there for the next 8 years. But being the oldest of 5 kids, she was like a third parent. She was given responsibilities, and she took them seriously. She was part of a very large family. She had 61 first cousins, and she knew every one of them. She was a star athlete in track and in volleyball, and she graduated salutatorian with a grade point average of 3.9999999. She will chastise me later for exaggerating on the number of nines, and I will respond, yes, but I did it to make a point. This was an incredible young woman, well-loved in her community. And off she went now to the University of Nebraska, where she met this Bubba pictured here. Doug was and still is an Air Force brat. I grew up on military institutions in 6 different states, with my final tour as a dependent right here in Hawaii at Hickam Air Force Base. When I graduated from Radford High School, I didn't know what my GPA was, and to be honest, I didn't care. I was just glad to be done. And apparently, whatever it was good enough to get me accepted at the University of Nebraska. You can see we're on a collision course here, can't you? So, I'm very thankful to a couple of researchers named Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs, who spent their academic lifetimes studying and researching personality characteristics. Their extensive labors brought them to conclude that there were 16 personality combinations that do an excellent job of describing the people we all are. Their work is now in the public domain, and you can look it up for further insights, and at your leisure, take a look at what they've done. For our purposes this morning, I just simply want to refer to this tool and show you that God indeed did make us different, and that it can be a massive blessing and not a plague of differences. Okay, you're wondering, wait, I didn't get finished reading that. Doug, what is that stuff? Sorry. Our Myers-Briggs personality scale on this next slide, you're going to say, wait, could you explain that a little bit more? I'll do my best. You see that there are 4 personality categories. God gave us, Leanne and I, at least one in common. We were both extroverts. Doesn't just mean we like people. It means we're energized by being with people, well, to a point. And I've noticed the older I get, the faster my people meter peaks, and I'm ready to, move on to a more quiet or lonely situation. But we're extroverts. In other words, we like being around people. Then the fun begins. Because Leanne is realistic, and I, not so much. Look at that next one. The characteristic that I'm referring to for myself is called a dreamer. Now, this will make you think that you've lost contact with reality. You don't know what's going on. Your head's in the clouds. You're useless. Yeah. The next one shows that Leanne is fair. She's a fair and by-the-book judge. The rules, in her mind, the rules apply to everybody. I'm very willing to make exceptions. In fact, I often made exceptions as a missions leader. And then finally, she is super organized and will neatly line up her tasks as well as mine. And I rarely appreciate this like I should, because I feel actually imprisoned by rules and regulations. Just give me the ultimate goal and let's go. Now, I'm not saying I'm right. Well, maybe but you can see that we are going to be challenged a little bit by the way that we just automatically respond to the way God made us and the impacts that our upbringings have had. As we move on to the next slide, you're going to see here Leanne's brain. In other words, the factors that dominate her thinking and her actions. Notice the major components: realism, headstrong, truth. Now, contrary to many women, she does not like poetry. She says, why don't they just plainly say what they mean? Why hide it in all this fluff? Did I mention realism? And if you are like her, then you are bothered by the fact that slides number 2, 3, and 4 in my presentation were not lined up right. They were off center, and you're still bugged by that. Now, here comes her husband. Take a look at his brain. People lover, people pleaser, attentive to other people's needs, real or imagined. His mood is dominated by how good the personal relationships are at the moment. Additionally, he is always looking for a different way to do it, and by it means everything. Rules are really more like nasty restrictions, which I should take seriously, but I actually chafe under them. Notice the question why on my brain. It's kind of the base of everything, isn't it? It's like, why? Why? Why do we have to do this? Why? And poor Leanne will say to me, Doug, that's just the way it is. Why? Now, if pictures and cute sayings don't really do it for you. You may like understandable words a lot better. So on this next slide, just look at these amazing qualities that Leanne has as an ESTJ. You want this woman on your team. She will keep you on task and out of trouble. Ultra reliable and knows what needs to be done. Put this person in charge of a project and your goal will be accomplished, guaranteed. Now, transform Doug's brain from rainbows and butterflies to words, and this is what you get. You get the ENFP. He makes for a great cheerleader, but rarely, if ever, are they put in positions of executive leadership. Most senior leaders of any organization are the exact polar opposite of me. And when they are thrown together, they truly drive each other bonkers. The same thing can happen in a marriage. We know. When you're polar opposites, or almost in this regard, that is going to have a big impact. One of the disciples was really bothered by a statement Jesus made, and so now they're walking along, and they say, Jesus, got a question for you, and their question had to do with divorce and remarriage. And Jesus' answer here gives us an important theological truth about a husband and a wife. Here was his answer. Here's what it said. Haven't you read the scriptures? Jesus replied. They record that from the beginning God made them male and female. And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife. And the two are united into one flesh. Since they are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. Now, for our purposes this morning, we're interested in this one thing. How do two such very different people become one? How does that happen? How can it happen? Can it happen? Is that an aspirational goal from Jesus Christ that he knows you're never going to get there? But I just wanted you to know what we hoped you would do. No. If he said it, he expects it. How do we become one? Well, how do we have a powerful and growing love for this person who so often drives us crazy? There's a great book by Gary Chapman in which he talks about these issues of how different we are. And he says, the key is to make our differences an asset rather than a liability. Look all around you and what do you see? What works best? Sameness or complementary differences? Just look at anything. Nature, teams, plants, animals. When you see exact sameness, you don't see progress. You see sameness. But when you see complementary differences, you're going to see an organization or a relationship that has the potential to take off and go. Just in ministry alone, I had the opportunity to work with another guy who absolutely hated to get up and preach. He loved praying. He loved one-on-one evangelism. And he said, Doug, would you come and work with me? And I said, I think we might be a fit because we are nothing alike. Everything in ministry that we like to do and that we're good at is different. And we worked together for a couple of years, and It worked out just like we thought. Very complementary. The church grew. You know, there's no rocket science here. It is simple, but it is also challenging. You do have to sit down together and agree to calmly write down all your characteristics, or better yet, don't do that. There's help out there. Do what we did. Go online and look at this Myers-Briggs personality inventory. You can answer it online, and they'll send you the results, and they'll send you the data you need to sit down and talk about your differences and how they can be turned into assets. And just to agree, wow, you're like this. You're like Leanne. You're like Doug. Uh-oh. No, you can take out the uh-oh by sitting down, talking about it, and agreeing, God made you that way. I want to learn how to benefit from that. And stop calling your spouse's perspective wrong. Stop that. Her perspective is not wrong. It's her perspective. And if it's different from yours, it's because that's the way God wired her, and that is the way she feels and thinks. Even if it is a nail. It's her perspective, and that's what you need to deal with. Not what you want her perspective to be. In marriage, there's a vast difference between unity and uniformity. It is God's purpose that we become one, but it is never God's desire that we become alike. If you both think alike in everything, then one of you is unnecessary. And I know who it would be in our situation. So don't expect to think alike. Don't even want that. Your marriage does not need a second you. So stop trying to turn him or her into that. Instead, intentionally encourage and humbly learn from the God-given strengths that your spouse has and you don't. A lot of words there, all of them important. And I'm so sorry it took me so long to get to this point. Intentionally encourage and humbly learn from the God-given strengths that your spouse has and you don't. Now, if you're not married, it's like Scott said last week. If you're not married, it's very likely that someday you will be. And even in this series, he's going to talk about singleness. So we're not forgetting you. We're not assuming you're just shoved to the side. We're hopeful that this is information you're taking in so that when God does bring you to that point of a marriage relationship, you're going to be able to say, oh yeah, there were some important ideas in that message series. So, in order to have great relationships, and especially a wonderful marriage, do everything that these three verses tell you to do. We're going to take a look at Colossians 3, 12 to 14 again. Do everything that these verses tell you to do. Number one, know who you are. You are chosen, holy, and dearly loved. Number two, get properly dressed. Put on these 5 characteristics. Number 3, forgive any and all offense because that is how you have been treated by Jesus Christ. Number 4, let unity be one of the results of your love for one another and not the other way around. Do not withhold your love until unity is achieved. That is a disastrous precedent. And what you're saying is, my love has to be earned, and you got to earn it. And until you fall into line, no love. You don't get it. If you're at that point, your marriage is almost dead. One of the great things about our Savior Jesus Christ is bringing things back to life is something he does well. Lazarus. Every funeral Jesus attended ended in a resurrection. So, can he bring our relationships back to life? Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Do not withhold your love until unity is achieved, but let the unity be the result of loving well. Finally, to have a wonderful marriage relationship, it is essential to love the stranger. So, he wants you to be fully aware of the differences between husband and wife, and he wants those to be assets and not liabilities. So we can change the title in this next slide to Love Your Stranger. And you know what? You're probably stranger than he or she is. Just assume that you are. How do you love your stranger? Well, let's review everything. Or better yet, in the wise words of Inigo Montoya, let me sum up. Identify the differences, thank God for them, promise to respect and learn from them, and finally, love with wild abandon and forgive recklessly. Why? Because that's exactly what Jesus does for you. Now go and do likewise. But only if you want a wonderful, joy-filled marriage. And I believe you do. So let's pray to that end. Father in heaven, your word is awesome. And anytime we read it, we are blown away by your truth, by your wonderful plan for us, by your wonderful sacrifice, especially that your son Jesus came and made on our behalf. Lord, you are great, great God. Thank you for the differences between a man and a wife. Thank you for the differences in the relationships that we have in a family. And Lord, help us to not be irritated by those constant differences, but to say, let's talk about how we can turn that into a positive thing and watch unity be the result. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.